Yeah, so
Okay.
why don't we just, why don't we dive in? So Ken McLeod, I'm really stoked to welcome you on my podcast. I first heard of you via my teacher, Michael Taft, and I've listened to all of the podcasts where he interviewed you. I've also listened to, I believe, and this is very bad, I don't know if it was the Heart or the Diamond Sutra. My memory really sucks, but I listened to your Alembic course that you did. I think it was the Heart Sutra.
Diamond Sutra.
Okay, there you go. Good to mess up at the beginning, so to get it out of the way. But I did enjoy that. But yeah, welcome. And maybe can I ask you, what would you add? So I would say you're a teacher. I know you're retired, supposedly, but you're also a writer. And I would call you a Dharma teacher. But how would you introduce yourself?
Well, now I introduce myself. If people ask, what do you do? I say I live and breathe, and I sometimes write. And but the I have a long background or relationship with Tibetan Buddhism going back to 1970, I guess. And so I can say actually that it's been the major focus of my life. And during that time, I did teach for quite a while, about 20, 30 years. And from there, I moved into writing, which I find is, I think, the right thing for me to be doing now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do also know you from your book. So for those people who are watching, I'll also say, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book, The Magic of Vajrayana. I'm, besides bad at remembering the name of the sutra, I'm also bad at finishing books, but I got very far in this one, almost finished it. And just recently I've been, using your book, This Unexpected Jewel, about the Diamond Cutter Sutra or the Vajra Cutter Sutra or the Diamond Sutra. And yeah, I'm really enjoying your writing style, especially from The Magic of Vajrayana. Somehow the way you write it's very intimate. It's really close to your experience. Is that also how you perceive or how you are relating to your own writing process, that is very intimate?
I've never used the word intimate, but I think it's a perfectly good word to use there. The way that when I'm writing, because I'm usually writing about Buddhist practice in one way or another. And when I write, I want people to experience what I'm writing about rather than just understanding it. So I try to write in such a way that it evokes that experience. Maybe that's what you're calling intimate.
Mm. Yeah, I want to maybe correct or adjust the word. It's maybe not exactly intimate, but there was a vulnerability that I noticed in what you write. Or maybe another word is honesty, but something in that it feels very close for some reason. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Well, good. I mean, I don't think it's pretentious for me to say that the reason I write is because it's my way of trying to help others. So I'm really writing for the people that may read the book. And
yeah. A question comes up to me that is quite practice bound, that I wasn't preparing, but I have it. And I think actually now remembering one of your interviews that Michael Taft interviewed you were, I believe, and I think you even quoted the Jewish prayer, and there's something like, what was it even? I got myself into the weeds with this sentence. I'll try to walk it back a little bit. So for instance, when you do the bodhicitta prayer, when one does that, how do you actually cultivate the sincere wish to wish others well? Because I don't always wish others well. So how to go from there?
well, I think the Jewish prayer you may be referring to is from, if I remember correctly, Eli the Elder. If I'm not for myself, who will be? If I'm not for others, who am I? If not now, when? Something like that. I may not have got it exactly right. But but in answer to your question, the clearer we are about our own struggles in life, the more sympathy we have for others. And so, because we're all in the same boat, basically. And that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But the practice that I've found probably most helpful is the one comes from the Tibetan tradition called taking and sending, which you take in the suffering of others and you suffering and struggles of others, and you send out your own joy and well-being in your own life. And there are many, many layers to this, of course, but what I have consistently found is that the more fully I take in and open to the suffering of others, or not even the suffering necessarily, but when you see somebody doing something that you think is terrible and really horrible, you can call it bad, evil, whatever you want. Coming out of my practice of taking and sending, I would ask myself, where would I have to be acting that way? And then I just imagine myself, okay, I'm doing this action. What is happening in me that leads me to think that doing this is the right thing to do? And then you get into some of the very distorted ways that other people look at the world. And I mean, really distorted. And you go, wow, that's terrible. And you can't help but feel some kind of compassion because, I mean, there are a few people, I don't think that many, who actually enjoy inflicting suffering on others. There's a small percentage. But even those people, you know, I mean, where would you have to be to enjoy inflicting suffering on somebody else? It's not a place most of us want to go to.
Yeah.
And so I see compassion as something that is present in all of us. And it's just our struggles with life that binds us to this fact. And one of the things that I found, that I've only recently started changing my vocabulary and keeping with this, but all of the metaphors that are used in traditional Buddhism are based in agriculture or things growing more generally, not in manufacturing or industrial processes, which is a relatively recent development in the human experience. And so I look at things more and more in terms of growth rather than cause and effect, you might say. Karma is absolutely an agricultural model. It's about That's how my teacher always explained it in terms of a tree that grows from a seed. And so this is actually quite a wonderful way, I find, of looking at things, because you move away from having to accomplish things to focusing on planting good seeds and trusting that the passage of time is going to take care of things.
Yeah.
Is that an adequate response to your question?
I love it. Yeah. There's something I want to say about it. Yeah, it's something about focusing on intention rather than outcomes. I guess that's my little translation of it. But it's kind of beautiful. You water the seeds, and then if you do it well and with attention, then maybe the tree will grow and maybe not. But that's where you can care. Something like this comes to me.
And I think you're right. Implicit in what I said is being clear about one's intention, and let the outcomes come by themselves, because when the results come into being, we're going to be different people, and the world's going to be a different place. And well, I thought this tree would be useful to people, but I guess it isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's happened to me a few times. Or, oh, well, I planted that. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it comes in handy right now.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. And you mentioned your teacher, who is Kalu Rinpoche. I have a question about him also. But also, since we're still in the beginning of our conversation, I want to see if I can ask one kind of introductory question. So I actually found your Wikipedia page, and I didn't know, but I learned that you have studied mathematics. You have a master's in mathematics, if I understood it well.
Yes.
Maybe that's like completely out of your interest at the moment, but I have an interest in mathematics. I'm bad at it, but I have a more philosophical interest in it. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the relationship between mathematics, reality, and the human mind, or if you're like just not interested. Please tell me if you just find it like a silly question or something. But that's my curiosity.
Well, it's ironic that you asked that question. For a reason, I mean, I enjoy mathematics. I don't think I'm terribly good at it, at least not. I was listening to how a series of lectures on how Galois theory developed, and this was in the 17th and 18th centuries. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and I'm going, wow, and it's really quite fascinating. But
And just for the listeners, sorry, can you say what they describe, the Galois equations or
Galois
equation? I don't even know. Theory.
Galois was a brilliant and an extraordinarily brilliant French mathematician who got in trouble and found himself facing a duel. So the night before the duel, he scribbled down a notebook, and he was in his late teens, early 20s, and outlined this theory which related the ability to come up with a formula for the solutions to a certain kind of equation, and something that was just in being developed, and a whole new system called group theory. And it's one of the gems of pure mathematics. I mean, it has applications in quantum physics and places like that. But and then he went out and fought the duel and lost. He died. But it has to do with algebra at a very, very deep level. And but for some reason or other, YouTube has been throwing up at me this whole conversation about is mathematics something that is discovered or invented?
Mm-hmm.
Roger Penrose, who's an extraordinary mathematician, and I think he's a Nobel Prize winner, I'm pretty sure he is, has made a lot of important contributions, was talking about it. And I think the question is deeply, deeply flawed.
Hmm.
I mean, I can understand why the question arises, but it's like Galton's question, is it nature or nurture? Well, it's not one or the other. Those two, I mean, you have young children, you know this very well. They come into this world and they have personalities of their own right
Yeah.
from the beginning. And some of that you can change by good upbringing, and some of it, nope. One of the people that is basically overseeing Unfettered Mind's website, this website where all my stuff is stored or is posted. He has a young child, and she's 5 or 6 now, and she absolutely has a mind of her own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's easy. Sometimes it's very easy to ask questions that seem to make sense, but are actually deeply problematic. And that's how I feel about that. Is
Yeah.
mathematics discovered or invented? But and this moves us straight into Plato's philosophy, which I've always had a trouble with. And I do not share Whitehead's opinion that all Western philosophy is a footnote, or just a series of footnotes to Plato. I think that is, of course, I've been trained in Eastern thinking fairly deeply now, so my views of these things is a little different. But the things arise in the mind. I mean, you know this from sitting down to meditate. And the deeper you go in practice, the stranger it becomes. You know, they just appear out of nowhere, and then they dissolve. And then they appear out of nowhere and dissolve. And the thing is that most of the time, we take whatever arises as something that is true or real. But it's just the way our mind has taken shape that way. And if you sit there, it just dissolves, and it's as if it was never there before. This is why they often said like clouds in the sky. And so I don't share the view of invention versus discovered. It's discovery. To me, mathematics has always been more like a language in which we can talk about certain things. And our language is created or discovered. I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how that kind of dissolves the question. And I was just curious if you had a view, and there you go, that's the view. And thank you for that answer. I'm happy to leave it there as well, and
Okay.
to switch, if it's okay for you, to your teacher, because I did have a question about it. The question is in a way very plain, but I imagine maybe the answer is deep. So you've studied, if I understand well, and practiced under Kalu Rinpoche for a long time, and also from what I understand, your main mode of teaching is also one-on-one and ongoing coaching, or whatever you want to call it, sessions with people. And my question is, to what degree and in what way does love play a role in those relationships? It's not just philosophical, right? There's something deeply from the heart there. Could you talk any about that?
Well, you're quite right. Uh, it's actually quite important. That emotional quality is quite important. In Buddhism, we have actually I can say 5 emotions, which are very important. 4 are known as the 4 immeasurables, or the 4 Brahmavicharas, the abodes of Brahma.
Yeah.
Loving, well, in the Mahayana, they're usually given in the order of equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, and joy. And those are very, very important. The 5th one is faith, which I also think is very important. And faith can take expression as devotion. And we have this actually in English. We say that he was a faithful servant. We could also say he was a devoted servant, or a faithful friend, or a devoted friend. They're very closely connected. Now, using the word love brings in a couple of things which may be good to differentiate. I think the most important aspect of love is warmth, and that a loving person is a warm person, and you feel it. I feel it very tangibly, and I felt that with Rinpoche, that very, very deep warmth on a few occasions. The other side of love is that, at least in the West, and the Tibetan word for loving kindness doesn't have this at all. It's personal, that there's a very personal connection, that this person means something to you and I mean something to them. And that's where it gets a bit more complicated and can get messy, of course. And people can mistake loving kindness and compassion and any of the others, and faith and devotion, for that personal kind of, we can say, romantic or love. But I really want to put the emphasis on the personal kind of thing, because that's where problems could arise, because then something in us wants to respond to that, but it's very much something that wants to hold on to that connection. If that emotional connection isn't present between teacher and student, it makes transmission more difficult. Not impossible, but more difficult. It's like that emotional connection is a kind of a pipe, maybe, or some kind of conduit which allows energy, emotional energy, to flow in a way that is very important. And in the practice, I'm sure you've heard of it, of what is usually often translated as guru yoga, usually translated as teacher union practice. You're actually cultivating that emotional relationship with your teacher. But it's not. But what you're cultivating there isn't the personal kind of love that we associate with in the West. It's very much this opening and warmth, which makes receiving much more possible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I believe it does. What I'm getting from it is there's a confusion that's easily made when we use the word love between the kind of personal attachment style of love, and it's very directed at one human being, whereas the love of the teacher-student relationship is more a love of the heart that is probably universal, or it would, if your heart is opened with, in your case was with Guru Rinpoche, it would also have opened to other people because of your connection with him. Does that resonate at all?
Yes, it's in the Catholic tradition, Catholic Christianity and Sufism both have a way of moving, see love as moving through stages, which starts off with the child's love for the mother, and then matures into love for another, and then eventually into a love of God. And that's seen as a maturation process. That path I haven't come across it in Buddhism, not to my knowledge anyway. It may be there. I haven't read everything, that's for sure. But on a personal level, I have found the cultivation of that emotional quality in the relationship was very important, and it's not. It made a very big difference in my practice, and the primary way to cultivate that is through prayer. And as you cultivate that kind of relationship, then you discover that you're capable of other kinds of relationship too, which you may not have. So it's a way of opening to emotional element. And certainly one of the reasons I taught the four immeasurables as much as I did and have written about them as much as I have is because they are very, very important. There's many students that I've had, when they've really hit that loving kindness and compassion, it's just changed their relationship with life in a way that they were not expecting at all. And it's like, where did this come from?
Yeah. I have a personal relationship with that, and my practice, I don't know if I should call it practice, especially when I talk to somebody who has done years and years and years of retreat, but I have my own practice. But it involves nonviolent communication, and I've done a whole bunch of courses with Michael. But one of the things I've noticed is that so there's a word in nonviolent communication called enemy images, and it's basically, as you probably get from the word, it's projecting this animosity onto others. This kind of enemy images that we're not friends. And what I've noticed is that my kind of analysis is that my nervous system has relaxed more deeply as kind of a baseline, and then I project less enemy images. That actually links me to this quote that I really love of yours. That's also on my website. I'd love to read it to you and then just get your reflection or reaction. Yeah. So this is the quote, and I think I shortened it a little bit. I couldn't find it anymore, the complete quote, but it's complete enough, I think. So here it goes. There is no enemy, nor is there any absolute or ultimate truth, state of perfection, ideal, or final achievement. Reality is beyond words. On the other hand, to be free of suffering, to be free of struggle, involves nothing more than to stop opposing what arises in experience. To practice in everything the simple dictum, there is no enemy. This seems highly related.
Oh, it is. I was just going to go there myself, but you did it first. I mentioned earlier, I think before we started recording, that I'm working on this collection of practice tips, and it's going to be 5 volumes, and the title for the collection is "There Is No Enemy."
Oh yes.
And this came out of an experience I had in 2008 when I was teaching a couple of retreats in New Mexico. And it's also led me to what it came up with that and exactly what you read in that quote. And also was the end of my teaching career. Because after that, I didn't have any choice. I had to stop teaching. And what you're saying about nonviolent communication, enemy images. One way I put it is that an enemy is something or someone who triggers emotional reactions in us that we can't tolerate. We can't. We just have to get out of there. And so anything that triggers those, we push away, we suppress. We may even divorce, separate. We may even kill, just so that we don't have to experience those emotional reactions in ourselves. And there are probably a lot of people who'd say, it's very different from that. But this I have found extremely useful for myself. And so then the question becomes, okay, how do I develop the ability to be able to experience whatever arises in me? And this, I think, is exactly what Buddha did 2,500 years ago. He found a way to be at such a level of peace that he never had to push anything away. And certainly when I find for myself that if I can touch into that kind of peace, then somebody may be being very, very unpleasant to me. And anger just doesn't arise. In certain respects, it's like weird, it's strange, like this. Because after some meetings, this has happened a few times, people said, well, why didn't you get upset about that? I said, well, I don't know. He was obviously upset, so I didn't say that me getting upset was going to help. Do you know, there's a movie called Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks. It's about it's a fictionalized version of a Russian spy who is traded for a couple of Americans that are caught behind the Iron Curtain. This is back in the 70s, maybe as far back as the 60s. I'm not sure when. But the spy who's been in American jail, etc., Tom Hanks, who's playing the attorney who negotiates this exchange, says, well, aren't you upset about this? And the spy just keeps replying, would it help? And it almost never does. And the ability not to get upset rests on the ability to experience what is arising and not get trapped by it, not get caught by it. And that, I think, is essentially what we're doing in our meditation practice. We're sitting with stuff and bubbles up, and we notice. There's a woman I had who, as a student many years ago, she had a business that provided services, shipping services at business conferences. And so, and there's an awful lot of tracking of parcels and things like that. And she found after she'd been meditating for about 6 months that the way she responded to customers who were upset and whose packages hadn't arrived or anything, that had changed. Because instead of getting into an argument, she would look at her database and say, no, that was delivered to so-and-so then, or you could check here, or something like that. And she just stopped getting upset. These things, because in her meditation practice, she had got used to just things come up, let go, things come up, let go. And now these things were coming up in her life and she just wasn't reacting to them. I thought that was pretty good. And it's not a case of suppressing at all. And that's really important. It's that things come up and there's no need to react to them inside. It's like, there's I think it's the Taoist example of a person who's in a boat and it's poling in a boat and it's in the fog and there's another boat in front and he says, move out of the way. And the boat doesn't move and keeps going. And eventually a collision is unavoidable and his boat crashes into the other boat. And then he sees that the other boat is empty.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's just stuff that is arising. But we get caught by it. And I don't want to give the impression that I don't get caught by things. I get caught by things all the time, but maybe a little fewer than before.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just a different myself. I'm such a different person if I meditate. That says something about the power of meditation, and also, to use the Buddhist language, the severity of my afflictions. That a bit of meditation is already really a difference. So that's one thing I just wanted to say. Another thing is that
well, you could look at it that way. You could look at it as maybe indicative of the effectiveness of your meditation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's really just the strongest medicine for me is meditation.
Well, good.
And and one thing that seems so clear intuitively, I know that there's talk of the two wings of Buddhism. One is whatever word you can use different words, but wisdom and compassion.
Yes.
And it seems when you explain these examples or tell these stories, it seems so obvious that they're really connected, because the clearer you see, the more compassion you automatically have.
And the more compassion you have, the clearer you see.
Yes, because you have less trigger, right? And more availability to witness. Yeah.
And it's interesting to note that in Tibetan anyway, courage is regarded as a synonym for compassion.
Okay.
That was pointed out to me by a very distinguished Lama that I was talking with. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because we don't usually associate those two together. But when you think about it, they are. And so just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. The vulnerability. And then also the word cœur, as you probably know, in French is heart. So there's already a language link there in the European languages as well, I guess.
I'm not sure of the word for...
Yeah, the French word for heart is cœur. So it's the French word for heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it's the same for courage. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I understand. Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting how language works.
Yeah, I love that a lot. I love language etymology, and just looking where words come from. You seem to go quite deep in that direction yourself as well. Is that correct?
Well, it is. It's because I translate, and it's mainly because I translate, but also because I write. Wittgenstein has been a huge influence on me. I didn't realize how much until I started translating, or had been translating for a while. A friend of mine, when I was just starting to translate in earnest, was back in the probably 73, 74, somewhere around there, gave me his copy of Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations. And he very sensibly said to me, well, he said, read this. This is not negotiable. And he said, do not try to understand it. Just read it. And I'm not trained in philosophy. So I did. I found it absolutely fascinating. But what I found is that when I'm translating, when I'm speaking myself, I try to find the right word. And the right word isn't necessarily the one that has the meaning. It's the word that is going to be heard the right way, and how you use it. I mean, there's a very famous basketball coach, Red Auerbach, who said, it's not what you say to the players that counts. It's what they hear.
Yeah.
And so, and I'll just give you a very simple example. I find that the word suffering is not a very good translation for the Sanskrit word dukkha. In English, I think the better word is struggle. Because if I sit down in front of a group of, say, 50 people and say, how many of you suffer in your life? Oh, half dozen, maybe as many as 10 will hold up their hands. And the others will go, well, have inconveniences that they don't really suffer. But if I say, how many of you struggle in your life? Almost everybody holds up their hand, because we do. And it doesn't work. Struggle doesn't work in German, because that's Kampf. But someone I know in Germany wrote to me and said, I can't remember what the word is, but there is a different word in German which does the same thing in English that struggle does in English. It does the same thing in German. So this is not something that would necessarily work across all Western languages, but you want to look for a word which describes, our actual relationship with life, rather than this thing called suffering. And I really pay a lot of attention to words. And for this reason, I'm very much the black sheep in Buddhism. I feel that almost all of the standard vocabulary, which is now used in translating Buddhism, is just wrong. For exactly this reason.
Yeah. But I find it refreshing, actually, because you hear the word suffering, you hear all those words. But now that you just said the word struggle, all of a sudden, kind of a new vista opens in my mind of, oh, wait a second. And so I really like what you said, not about what you say, but what the other person hears. That's just, I really enjoy that. It's much more alive. So,
well, let me give you another example, if I may.
Yeah.
So you've heard the word Dharma, of course.
Yeah.
Now, Dharma has a lot of different meanings in both Sanskrit and Tibetan. And but one of the meanings is usually translated as phenomenon or phenomena. You familiar with that?
Yeah.
So if I say to you, all dharmas are shunya, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, all phenomena are empty then.
Well, that was going to be, okay. So you have to, all dharmas are shunya. It's not even a translation, right? Just two Sanskrit words. And you say, all
right.
phenomena Yeah, so you translated it yourself. All phenomena are empty. And that was going to be my next question. All phenomena are empty. Well, how does that strike you?
So it strikes me in the Michael Taft way, and you probably know the Michael Taft way, and so there's nothing fixed. If you look closely at your own experience, you will just see that there's, to put it in one way, there's only not even verbs, but just verbing. So this is kind of the direction I would say that strikes me.
Okay. Now I'm going to try another one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What if I say to you, all experience is empty?
Yeah, that's more direct. That's more direct for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomena is a bit conceptual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. When you say all experience are empty, you go, oh.
Yeah.
Communicate something that the others don't. They're meant to, but they don't.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing I try to pay attention to.
Yeah. It's really cool. And I think this is basically what I tried to say earlier. It's the words you use make it very direct. I guess direct is one of the ways that come to me now. Which is also a simpler word than what I used earlier. Yeah. Yeah, I think I have basically 3 more questions, and of course that can go anywhere. By the way, maybe can we be specific about the time? You said you could go you were happy to go a bit longer. What would be your...
Yeah. I don't want to go past 10:30 my time, so another 30 minutes.
All right. Yeah, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, so I would love to ask you a question about your primary teacher, Kalu Rinpoche. I'm guessing he has long since died,
He
probably
died
decades ago, or?
He died in 1989.
Yeah. I think, if I'm honest, I would just love to hear what were some mind-blowing experiences, however subtle or grand, or could you just share anything that would be like, just cool?
That's it's not like that.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing, at least for me anyway. I think it varies a lot from person to person. There isn't anything particularly mind-blowing or he liked to tease me, and I think I translated faithfully for him on his first 2 tours of North America, which was challenging in many ways. Those were early years. Those were in the 70s, and but Kalu Rinpoche wasn't afraid to break new ground, and he was the first person to set up a 3-year retreat for Westerners, and I was part of that, and he set it up not only for men, but he also set up identical facilities for women. I was married at that time, and my wife did the 3-year retreat, the women's 3-year retreat. So, and it was very important for Rinpoche. Teaching was something he took very, very seriously, and but more than that, we talked earlier about sowing seeds,
and how things grow. Well, we were in Toronto, in Canada, and Rinpoche said, I'd like to go out and see something in the city. And I went, okay. Well, there was at that time a winter fair held in Toronto, which was one of the largest agricultural fairs in North America.
Hmm.
And it happened to be being held at the time. I said, so we could go and see animals. And Rinpoche looked and said, a lot of animals? I said, yeah, a lot of animals. He said, is this a zoo? He said, no, it's not a zoo. There's just a lot of animals. So he went there, and he walked around all the fairgrounds, blessing every animal.
Wow.
All the cows, all the horses, all the chickens, and we'd go up and down, and even all the carcasses from all of the cows. We just walked for hours and hours and hours. And every time he finished, he said, are there any more animals? And I would look at the map. And, yeah, there's some more over here. And he would be scattering rice and saying, oh, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, and things like that. And what was he doing? As far as he was concerned, he was establishing connections with all of those animals so that in future lives, they would have some connection with Buddhism and practice.
Mm.
That's what he was doing.
Mm.
And he wasn't a young man at that point. He was well into his 70s. And but that he just walked tirelessly up and down the aisles, in and out of the stadiums and things like that. That's what he wanted to do. And that's one of the ways in which his compassion and concern to help beings manifested. He would spend a great deal of time establishing these connections.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I'm curious if he could have finished that. It sounds like, I don't know, a lot of animals, maybe thousands or something.
No, we went through every building in the exhibition.
Yeah.
We didn't leave until I said, no, there's no more animals.
Yeah.
The rest of us were just dead tired by this one. He said, okay.
That's funny.
Where we were still, it was fine. So no, I mean, literally, there were thousands of animals there. You're quite right.
Yeah.
But he wanted to make some kind of connection with everyone, that as much as possible. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned earlier also, just to make a little jump there, because it is an interesting topic for me, that you also mentioned the 3-year retreat. I know you did too. At least that's what I've understood. My idea would be, first of all, that sounds amazing. And also that sounds really scary. I'm curious how you went into those, maybe how you went into the first one and how you went into the second one. I guess it's a big story, but what could you share?
Well, when Rinpoche visited North America in 74, 75, he told us that he was planning to do this. And by us, there's a small group of people, and there was a center in Vancouver, but there was a small group of us who had were very dedicated to practice. And and this was like a dream come true, because we would get all the advanced teachings and be this period of time where we could devote ourselves to practice, nothing else. The idea was a little intimidating, but it's what we wanted to do. So in 76, we had to earn enough money to support ourselves for the 3 years. But that actually wasn't that large amount of money, because room was paid for. We didn't have, it was just providing ourselves with food and personal effects. And we weren't going to do much traveling. We didn't need much money for clothes, et cetera, et cetera. We were just going to be in one place for 3 years. And then we went over France, helped build the 3-year retreat facilities, and then entered the retreat in, I guess, December. I think November or December 1976. And this is the first time that anybody, that people had done this kind of retreat before, but this is the first time the group had done a 3-year retreat. So it was a kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first 3-year retreat, it became clear Rinpoche was going to send us to different centers where we were meant to teach. And I just didn't want to do that. And my wife, as I said, was in the the other 3-year retreat. And we learned that there was the possibility of doing another 3-year retreat. So when my wife and I decided we couldn't decide until we'd actually met in person. So when the retreat was open and we'd actually talked about it for a day or two, decided, yeah, she didn't want to teach either. So we went and asked Rinpoche if we could do a second 3-year retreat. He said yes. By then, the other retreatant said, another retreatant had also had the same idea and had got permission. By then, the other retreatants really didn't like the prospect of going teaching, but it was too late. Rinpoche said no to all the other ones. And for me, the retreats were extremely difficult because I got very, very ill. I learned a lot. I mean, we studied a lot of texts. We did a lot of different meditations. But I was so weak physically and emotionally by the end of the second 3-year retreat that there was no possibility of continuing to do that kind of thing. My wife was actually very capable of continuing. She found sitting much easier, but I had discovered, well, I just got into all kinds of problems, and they were very difficult. It took me about 20 years to start to get over those problems. But somehow or other, I seem to have learned something anyway, which was a little surprising for me. Because in the second 3-year retreat, our retreat director went over to India to participate in a series of empowerments that Rinpoche was giving in the middle of it. So I ended up teaching the second half of the my second 3-year retreat, first 3-year retreat for the other people, and that was good. That was a distraction from my problems. That was helpful. And a friend of mine who also did a 3-year retreat, a different one in the U.S., said that of the 3-year retreat, it was the most wonderful and the most disappointing experience of his life. And that's not a bad way of looking at it. I mean, there were learning all of these different teachings and practices was incredible. I feel very, very fortunate to do that. And yet, in an environment like that, if you encounter difficulties, they can be really, really hard. And it's and that's where you find out what your relationship with Buddhism or a relationship with practice is. And a lot of people ask me, why didn't you just stop? And I thought about that question a lot. From a lot of different perspectives. But what I came to in the end was that the idea of stopping just never occurred to me. And that was actually a very important understanding, because that's when I started to view spiritual practice as a calling. It's something that you're called to. And if it's something that you're called to, then individual choice kind of gets thrown out the window. Rilke says this in Letters to a Young Poet. He says, if you can possibly live your life without being a poet, do so. It'll be much better. But if you're really going to be a poet, then here's how you do it. What did they say? If in the small hours of the morning you wake up and you know deep inside that you have to be a poet, then this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And I've never seen myself in those kinds of romantic terms, but there's something incredibly determined, I suppose, is the right word. And I just kept going, and I found a way to dig myself out of that hole with some very important help from a few people. And I was able to teach all the way through that. And I think I've helped a few people in the course of that. So that's how it goes.
I don't doubt that. Yeah, thank you. And isn't that also the meaning, like literally the meaning of devotion is somehow also I'm devoting myself, like my own voice, or is that a wrong etymology?
No, it isn't. I dug into this really deeply a few months ago. Because you have faith and belief and devotion and all of these terms, and they're kind of suspect terms in the West these days, at least in English anyway, in the Anglosphere. And I found that both belief and faith are often described or defined as holding on to something for which there is no evidence. Well, that's coming from the scientific perspective. But interestingly enough, when I dug into the etymology, I found that belief and faith started off meaning different things, but they both converged on that meaning as far back as the 14th century. That surprised me. Faith and devotion started off in one way. Belief started off in a different place. It had something more to do. I can't remember. So yes, but now given the way that the word belief is used, particularly in belief systems and things like that, I make a distinction between faith and belief. And faith I define as the willingness to open to whatever arises in experience, because you really don't know what it is, but you're willing to open to it. Now, that may be because you have a great deal of faith in God, et cetera, et cetera. But in Buddhism, you have faith in Buddha nature, or faith in emptiness, or faith, whatever. It doesn't matter. But it's the willingness to open to what arises in experience. And whereas belief is the tendency to interpret what arises in experience to accord with what something you hold inside. So I see belief as a kind of closing down and faith as a kind of opening.
Okay.
And what I like to say is that belief makes bad science and bad religion, and faith makes good science and good religion. Because in science, the scientific method is about opening to whatever the data presents. And if the data says, oh, your theory's garbage,
Yeah.
start again. Whereas belief would be trying to hold on to that thing and fix it. But in the same way, so you have to have that kind of willingness to open if you're going to do science effectively. And these, experimental science. And in the same way that you have no idea what you're going to run into when you practice. And it usually is not what you think it was going to be. In fact, probably never is. And you've got to be willing to open to it. And so I found in terms of practice now that for me anyway, the most important word is listen. Listen to what your body's telling you. Listen to what your emotions are telling you. Listen to what your mind is telling you. Listen to what the world is telling you. I like the word listen because if you're really listening to someone else, you cannot be thinking about something. As soon as you start thinking, oh, I'm like, oh, no, that's not right because of this. You're no longer listening. So to listen, you've got to grow quiet inside. That's one of the reasons I really like it. And then you become very sensitive. And you may not understand what you're hearing. It's not about that. But you listen to it. And through that deep listening, then it begins to inform your understanding. You make decisions based on it. But I find that's, to me, meditation is primarily about listening that way. Really, really deep listening.
Yeah. I also find that literal listening, I know you're speaking into a deeper listening, and of course, I imagine it's included literal listening, actually also creates silence. It's also inversely true. Do you also see that or find that?
Yeah, you're quite right. Because if you really listen to someone, two things happen. One is they sense fairly quickly that they're going to be able to say anything that they really want to because you're listening. And because you're listening, then they start to listen to themselves too. And I think that's the silence you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they say changes. And it's because you are listening. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. I think we may have time for 2 questions,
Okay.
depending on how
As
quickly.
as long as I don't talk too much. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm just out of curiosity, and I think that maybe a question like this may be a bit too personal. Actually, I'm very open for that. But as a personal curiosity, I'm wondering, what does your practice look like these days, if you want to share at all?
Well, it's very simple. I've already told you. I said I listened. Now, I found that as you practice and learn practices, you're going to find certain practices speak to you more than others. And so the practices that I found speak to me are taking and sending. As I said, I had a very difficult time 3-year retreats. And afterwards, after the retreat, I also had a lot of difficulties. And so it gave me a lot of material to work with taking and sending. And taking and sending doesn't make anything better. But through it, you come to relate to experience in a different way, and that makes a huge difference. So that's been very important. And then Mahamud, or a direct awareness, or what people call formless or non-dualistic meditation. I really don't like those terms for a lot of different reasons. That's the other mainstay, and it's just what you were saying earlier about compassion and wisdom. Those two sides, and like you, I found that those two, having something, both of those. I practice a lot of deity meditation and do that. I have those relationships, you might say, but the taking and sending and listening very, very deeply are probably the main things that I work with now. And
thank you.
Well, the most important thing is to find a practice that really speaks to you, and then just do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's important, and I meant to mention this earlier, is prayer. Prayers an out of fashion, but an incredibly important practice. And if people spend a third to a half of their practice time praying, they would find that their practice is probably a lot more fruitful.
I love prayer, and I also love the Tonglen, the giving and sending. Yeah. And maybe then my final question is, given this conversation, what would you like to say as the final word, or maybe something that's still in the air, or what would feel fitting for you?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, at the risk of being repetitive, there's, in terms of how we view life, I think the most important point is death and impermanence. Everything passes. And at this stage of my life, actually, the ephemerality of life. And by the ephemerality of life, I don't mean that life itself just comes and goes like that. I mean, what you do in your life. I've written a number of books. It's now over 20 years since Wake Up to Your Life was published. And it's still selling, amazingly enough. And I feel very good about that, because I know that in those 20 years, a lot of other people have written a lot of other books, and they're nowhere to be seen now. And music, whatever, like, we think of, we have this classical music, but there were hundreds of composers in those days. Where's all their music? I just, what we do in our lives, it just, and even people I've known in relationships, it's like, at this stage of my life, they look like ghosts. They appeared for a while, and then they disappeared, and then they appeared, and then they disappeared. So life really, so viewing the world in terms of change, I think it's really good. In terms of practice, it's just what I said, listen. And in terms of how we live our lives, what I've come to is, whenever things feel out of balance, move in the direction of balance. And imbalance tells you when something's wrong with the way you're approaching the world. So take a look at that and move in the direction of balance. You'll never be in balance. That's not the point. But if you keep correcting imbalances, something may come of that. Okay.